All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of The Confluential, and I'm doing this solo today. Kyler is usually our wonderful host, but she is not feeling too hot, so we are going to give her a break from all of the hard work that she does, and I'm gonna be here to talk with you guys. So to kind of get a couple of easy things out of the way, my name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of The Confluential. We focus on helping companies leverage technology in many, many ways. We don't focus on any particular type of technology, although ERP and AI become two real big components of the skill sets that we have. We do a lot of different things. And today's conversation on tariffs is going to be focused on how you use technology or how technology can be a benefit in these types of times where there's so much uncertainty. So would love to know where you're tuning in from the chat box there. So if you give me an idea of your location, would love to hear from you as far as where we got from around the world. We often have people join from all over the place. So always fun to see those things, and looking forward to this conversation today. So hopefully you guys are tuned in to follow us through a number of our different channels, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the like, and ready to get going. The conversation today, like I said, is going to be about tariffs, and if you'll forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty on these types of solo conversations, but looks like we have Joe coming in from Grand Junction, and I'd love to learn about where more of you guys are from. So as we get into talking about tariffs, it's no surprise to everybody that we are currently entering a stage of uncertainty with these types of things, right? We don't even know at this point whether or not the tariffs are going to stick, or whether or not they're going to be suspended, whether how big they're going to be, and those types of things. But I think that the conversation is less around the idea that these tariffs are or aren't the right thing to do, but that they're happening, and these are things that are driving businesses to make different examples or make different decisions rather on how they run their business. I talked to an organization the other day that was feeling really good about their position in the marketplace, and how it is they were going to be able to run, lean into 2025 and really grow and catch some momentum coming out of 2024. And then the tariff conversation really injected a lot of uncertainty for them, and put their business in a position where they need to be more cautious with their decision making. And a lot of organizations are finding themselves in those spaces. So certainly easy to understand, because overall, the uncertainty of the conversation is a big part of the conversation. So welcome to those of you on the Western Slope, Grand Junction, Orange, California. I'm glad to have you today. I like this idea of taking a lot of questions from you guys in the audience today as well. It makes it a little bit more engaging than me just talking at you. I've had lots of conversation with folks over the years where if this turns into a conversation of me talking at you, nobody's going to have fun. I'll do my best, but questions are always good. Always happy to have some of those. So we'll even start off with one of the the questions that we have here in the audience. What are some examples of how tariffs have been used historically to shift business behavior? There's always the part that's intended versus the unintended consequences, which is part of business as it is. But for me, the idea that is supposed to be going on here is that there's a shifting of focus to saying, if I make something that is currently cheaper to get from one place more expensive to get from that one place, I create an opportunity for folks who are able to compete more effectively without that tariff burden. So And I'm going to do my best to kind of keep this more focused on how it is you guys can think about these types of things. And that's generally the purpose of a tariff, is to say, if something is more expensive in my market and less expensive in another market, and I want my market to capture that revenue, then I can place a tariff on the other market so that it increases that cost. So now comparatively, my prices in my market are more competitive. That is my understanding of how these things are supposed to work. I am not an economist, but that seems to be the general point. What that does is it creates a scenario where there's a bit of protection, right? One of the things that's a good example of this that I think about is a lot of countries like to protect not just their markets, but their cultures, right? There are a lot of unique cultures around the world, and it's an honorable thing to say that our culture is important, and we don't want it to become washed out by this insertion of all other things from all around the world. So there's a delicacy to that. Right, wrong, or indifferent, right? There's a lot. That's where some of these things come into play. So it's how some of those things also get shifted on what the business behavior is intended to be. At least as I understand it, as not an economic expert, but as somebody who feels like I understand. I see a lot of different things go on in the industry and decision making that's based on this, that, and the other. From a perspective of industries where tariffs play a big role, for you guys that are in those industries that feel like you're going to be heavily impacted by it, what kinds of analytics or data do decision makers rely on to stay ahead? And this is a really tough question that I'm hoping that many of you get a lot of good information from your business intelligence tools, and maybe even from your AI tools, to be able to help you understand what type of impacts you're going to have, right? The first time I really ran into the significant impacts of tariffs from a perspective of industries within the United States versus industries outside was with a toy manufacturer, actually, who got most of their plastics from abroad, particularly China, and all of the extrusions that were used to make their toys, and these things were sourced from China. They put a significant amount of effort ahead of these tariffs into stockpiling. That was one behavior that changed for them, to say, we know that these are coming. And in this particular case, it's a little bit late for that stockpile, but you may see as tariffs get paused and then pause, unpause, repause, buying behaviors where there are surges, right? And saying, well, now that the gates are open again, let's go and get as much as we can. So that might be an interesting buying pattern. But what they did was try to first get as much as they could, as quick as they could. They filled their warehouse to the brim and then considered actually expanding into other warehouses to be able to bring in a significant amount of volume to be able to last as long as they thought they possibly could. They also put together a campaign on other places where they could source those types of things. But as you can imagine, that's not an easy thing to do, right? Children's toys, as simple as plastic may seem, there are a lot of regulations and things that are expected for children's toys, because they're going to put those things in their mouths, right? Are they a choking hazard? Is there too much lead in them? What types of quality of raw materials are being used to create these? Because there's a significant safety factor in that. So they had to not only say, I need to be able to go somewhere else for these things, and they had a campaign to go visit many other different countries and see what types of suppliers could meet their needs and how quickly. So there's a lot of that balance too, that is in a sense of, how do I get the same thing or close to it at what's now going to be a lower price than what I can get it for today with tariffs. Maybe more expensive than I got it from last time, but they found, for example, that they could get a lot of these things from Vietnam, but there were some differences in quality. There were some differences in timelines on receiving these things that they needed to be able to adjust to. And that these suppliers that they were talking, lots of other conversations, lots of other folks that needed plastic extrusions and molds of goods that they were able to consider compared. All right, sorry about that. Looks like I'm back online, I hope. Where I was going with this was they made a relationship with new vendors who are also making a ton of new relationships with other folks, and now you have to be dependent on that particular supplier to be able to match the demand that they're getting. So there's a lot of this that kind of trickles down into those spaces. And as Scott Hayes is saying here, domestic manufacturers seem to be the target beneficiary. Most other domestic industries will end up paying more and charging more. Would you agree? The market will set the price, right? That is one thing that we always find. So will those prices go up? There's a good chance that a lot of those prices will be adjusted, right? So if I am now the lowest cost, and there's room to grow my price in that space, there's probably a likelihood that at least some organizations will take that as an advantage to increase their prices. So yeah, you could end up paying more. In this particular other scenario, it's this is that I'm talking about is also a scenario where this company didn't go to domestic producers for their raw materials. They went to another different country because it didn't have quite the exact impact and effect that was hoped for. That it would push certain industries back to the domestic production. So it takes time for an entire market to respond to these types of things. And short-term fixes tend to be the ones that rule the day in these types of things, especially in that scenario. So it's the uncertainty of the conversation that to me is the most interesting, because uncertainty that drives decision making tends to drive people to be more conservative in their decision making and not do certain things because they're trying to figure out how things pan out. So it's a great question, Scott. From a perspective of another question in the audience, what kind of short-term versus long-term adjustments do businesses typically make in response to tariff changes? Most of it, from what I can tell and what I've seen, and I've talked to a lot of different companies and seen their buying behaviors at different times throughout different changes in the market. And I can certainly say with confidence that whenever there is uncertainty in the market, businesses make decisions more slowly. Uncertainty breeds a lack of confidence. A lack of confidence breeds a lack of aggression, and a lack of aggression leads to slower decision making, especially short term. There are some companies, the larger ones especially, that more money's on the line, right? I think of Ford as a good example, who is in the marketplace now saying in the United States, they're doubling down on how much they make in the United States and how much more they're going to invest in making in the United States from a perspective of their automobiles and those types of things. That is a long-term change, though, right? So those are reactive adjustments that they're saying now. I'll be interested to see if those reactive adjustments actually pan out, and if they do actually move a number of facilities. You don't open an automobile assembly plant, manufacturing plant overnight. You had to find a location. You had to build it. You had to create your supply chain routes that go into it for sourcing raw materials. You had to actually create all of your production lines. This takes a ton of time, and to be able to say that that's going to happen overnight, it's just a fiction, in my opinion. You can certainly set the wheels in motion for that type of production, but it takes time. The fastest responses in those regards are going to be from companies that already have capacity that aren't full. So, and we'll continue on the Ford example. If Ford has plants that are not manufacturing to capacity, they may increase that capacity, because right now things are less expensive comparatively in the United States to make for them, assuming that the impacts are what they're intended to be. And so making those at a higher volume in the US and decreasing volume elsewhere it makes a ton of sense to me. That's what I would see as a more likely short-term reaction, because it just simply takes time to shift those types of markets. What types of questions should leaders be asking their teams right now to make sure they're not caught flat-footed by sudden changes? That's a fantastic question, and I would, if it were me, I always think about supply chain being something that's is the front end of production, right? There aren't a ton of organizations who are directly connected to the ground source of their materials, right? Not very many people literally pull their raw materials from the ground and sell them right after that. There's a distribution engine involved in that. You have agriculture that's a little bit closer to it, but from a perspective of overall manufacturing, even food and beverage manufacturing has a lot of impacts in this, and saying, where am I going to get these things from? And there's still a delayed response in agriculture, because now I still have to grow it, right? If I'm going to increase capacity, it takes time for crops to grow and things like that. But from a perspective of what should we be thinking about, the two things that I would consider the most are, first, your supply chain. Where are you buying from? And then the second part would be your end customer, whether it's other businesses or the end consumer, right? What does their buying behavior look like, and how is that going to change? To Scott's point, prices going up, that's going to change buying behavior, right? Especially for substitute goods on the consumer end or on the end customer route. Where can I get my things from? And what does my price look like now? If all of a sudden I go from paying $100 a unit to $208 a unit, I'm going to start looking for something that might be less than that, and I might be more willing to pay $150 a unit, just to be able to know that I need these things. But I got to get them from somewhere. $50 more is better than $104 more. So that end customer behavior is important. But for me, from a manufacturer's perspective, price is an outcome of how much it costs to make something. If it costs more to make something, the price of that something will go up. So as your raw materials prices increase, because what was previously, again, I'll just use easy numbers, what was previously $100 a unit is now $208 a unit. I've got to find someplace else to get that. So my first questions for my teams, if I were a manufacturer in particular, would be, what are our options? What vendors do we have, and which ones are going to be the least impacted by these tariffs, from a perspective of not just pricing, but being able to meet our change in demand, because they'll see that as a change in demand for them. Are they the one organization that everybody in your country now is going to be looking to for that one substitute good that everybody gets from somewhere else? And are they going to pick you? Are you buying at a sufficient volume that they are going to say, we need to make sure we meet that customer's needs? Where do you stand on their priorities list? I would start thinking about those questions. and I would start talking to my supply chain and my procurement folks, and I would start flushing out other options. Where might I be a bigger fish for a similar quality of good to be procured from someone else, so that I can start getting it from somewhere else. I can start establishing those relationships, start understanding the quality that I'm getting quickly, so that then I can increase. Because at the end of the day, if your supply chain prices go up, it won't take long for organizations to decide that cost difference is going to get passed on. How can businesses build more tariff resilient supply chains or pricing models? For me, pricing models are a reaction to a couple of different things. That resiliency is hard to get into, in that pricing is kind of the end point of the math. There are some companies that use their pricing models as a competitive advantage, but for the most part, it costs me this amount of money to make something. In order to run my business profitably for the long term, I need to make a particular margin, and so I'm going to take the costs, I'm going to multiply it by the margin that I need, and that's going to be my price. If my cost goes up, then my price therefore has to go up. And we see this in a lot of different industries. Gas at the pump is a good one, right? As the cost of oil per gallon goes up, for the most part, you see that at the pump, because the raw material goes up, the margin stays the same, and the price goes up to the consumer. From a supply chain perspective, diversity for me is king. If you are dependent on one sole provider of one particular raw material that's critical to what you do, and they are going to now be heavily impacted from a pricing perspective on tariffs, because again, if their price goes up, if the cost for them goes up, their price will respond that way as well. So even if your raw materials are folks who are internal to your domestic market, you may find that they are going to be impacted negatively by these tariffs, and so that will impact their costs, and they'll pass that cost on to you. So your supply chain, and knowing that you got some diversity in it, for me, would be one of the best ways to really figure out how to do this. And you can use your technology from a perspective of your supply chain modules and your ERP, for example, to do an analysis and vendor scorecards and things like that, and say, all right, so we like these people because they are very high quality and very low price. It's a great combination for us, but that very low price is now a high price. And so I need to find somebody that I have in my supply chain network already that has a similar quality for a lesser price. And now you can start using your supply chain module and your procurement model, purchasing module, whatever it is your company calls it, to start analyzing your vendors and say, which one of these is going to be my best case scenario? And saying, I've got vendor A who is very inexpensive. You're welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining us. Vendor A who is very inexpensive, but their quality is pretty low. So I'm going to probably pay for that somewhere. Do I want to take that risk, or do I want to pay a little bit more from a vendor who's actually higher quality than I get from my less expensive person who just got more expensive, the vendor I'm trying to now replace because of these tariffs? Which route should I go? And you can use your demand planning module and your supply chain module to figure those things out based on the results that you've seen from those vendors. You should be able to compare those things. I would be remiss if I didn't suggest that you also understood these vendors' on-time performance, and then make a decision as to whether or not you think that their on-time performance is going to change, because you're not the only one thinking about this. What I like about the opportunity to take this past the supply chain module and past ERP and break into the business intelligence space and the artificial intelligence space, now you can run models, right? What happens if I do pick vendor A? and I find that their delivery times are the same, but their quality decreases with their and their price increases at the same time. What happens if that happens? What should I do? What happens if I like vendor A is all over the news because they are expecting this massive increase, and I know I'm not a top tier client for them. What happens if I get deprioritized and then I can't make my supply chain turns because they can't make theirs? What happens when that happens? You can model those things out. And business intelligence can get you a certain amount of the way with simple math, but what you can do with an AI model that's built in that is you can ask it more of the what ifs, right? You don't have to create and control the what ifs. You can say, if I have a vendor who is no longer available to me because of tariff changes, which of my vendors are going to likely also increase their volume to meet the capacity that I need? Which ones may have a history of being able to deliver on time that might change? And your model may be able to, depending on how you trained it, look to the outside market to understand this one is probably going to see a dramatic increase in volume. And during times where that increase in volume has been a challenge for them, they've struggled with quality and on-time delivery. Those are the types of things that you should be able to think about with AI. The challenge now is, do you have those tools in place, and being able to figure that out. You can also do a lot with AI as it pertains to consumer responses, if that's the industry, if you're in more of a consumer products industry, right? How are consumers going to react to a constriction in supply chains? And we have models and things like that from history that say when something changes from a perspective of supply chains, how does that impact buying behavior for my products, right? COVID's such a great example because that stressed the world supply chain to the max. And you can look back on that and use data and analytics to understand, if I'm no longer able to get things from overseas, what is the consumer reaction to that going to be? Is it going to be, are consumers going to care that it's going to just simply take longer and cost more money? Some of them may not, right? Like it's not like Amazon didn't still have an export import model for bringing in goods during COVID. It just took longer, right? That still happened. It just took quite a lot longer. It's not like taking a bridge out with us with a large cargo ship in the Baltimore area prevented people from doing things that should, buying things that were impacted by that. They just took longer to get there. So what does that look like from a consumer spending perspective? I would look at those types of consumer analytics and plug your business intelligence and your AI models into that, because the data is out there on how it is those things might be reacted to. And in my opinion, consumer behavior might actually be the easiest to talk to AI about, because you can ask the internet those questions as opposed to having to figure out whether or not your AI model internally is mature enough to be able to answer and understand those problems for you. Let me just kind of scroll through these questions to make sure I'm hitting them along the way. So give me one moment here. Just starting at the bottom. So we talked about that one. What kind of questions should leaders be asking? We talked about that. And I'm curious what you guys think. What types of questions are you asking your teams about how it is you'll be impacted by the business, especially executives, right? One of the most important things an executive can do is understand how to trust the people to do their jobs, right? You can't run every single facet of your own business. Otherwise, you wouldn't have employees, right? So if you want to rely on your people to do their jobs well, ask them, what do they think, and see what it is they have to say. And do you guys have some tools that can help us with this? Did you build any AI models? I bet somebody listening right now could ask one of their team members, do we have any AI models that are out there that I don't know about that might be able to help with this? I wouldn't be surprised if somebody does, and that there's something out there on somebody's desktop that they've been tinkering with that now all of a sudden could be useful to you. When internal teams or departments are usually most effective when tariffs are introduced or changed. Like I said, obviously supply chain, obviously sales, customer service is going to be another big one as well, right? Whether you call it customer service, customer care, however you like, they're going to be the ones getting the phone calls, right? All of a sudden, I've been ordering this thing from you for ages, and the price just went to what? From somebody who doesn't understand why that price went up, could be rather frustrated in that. And what you want to be able to do with your system is be able to know what their buying behavior has been in the past, what their pricing has been in the past, so that you can validate that. You'd be surprised how many people will call you and say that their pricing went up just to see if you believe them and bring their price down. I worked at a telecom company a long time ago, and there are people that will call to argue on pricing just to see if you'll give them a discount. They don't have to be right. They'll just do it. So you want your system to tell you, actually, your price hasn't changed on that item. And so appreciate you for making the phone call. Would love to know what else I can do to help you with, but your pricing has been pretty consistent over the last many years. So being able to respond to that effectively from a customer service perspective, and then be able to say things like, you know what, you're right, it is taking us longer to get you these things because we're trying our best to do this, that, and the other, and your system can tell you how you're performing for those particular customers. So customer service is another one that I think is probably going to get impacted by this, that people aren't thinking about, because they're the ones that answer the phone when there's an angry customer on the line and have to figure out how to deal with that. And the more information they have at their fingertips, the better. So if you're not talking to your customer service department about those types of things, you might think about it and giving them a heads up and having a strategic approach, saying, this is how we're going to those types of questions. The most important, what's one thing most people get wrong about the impact of tariffs on digital transformation? That they're predictable. That's one thing that I think is important to remember, is that, and this is something that with digital transformation, technology in general, being able to respond quickly, understand what's changed, to what magnitude, and where quickly, makes that decision-making process a bit more nimble. Then that way, when you say, this is what we're seeing in this area, I'm going to make this change to see if we can figure it out. I'm going to change vendors. We'll go back to the supply chain model that maybe I'm beating up a little bit too much today, but I like. I decided to pick this vendor as a replacement for my usual favorite. And now, so they are going to be sourcing this raw material. They've done a pretty good job in the past. Their price has been pretty reasonable in the past. And then I need to be able to know if that's working out for me. Are they delivering on time? Is the quality that they've delivered on in the past of actual raw materials the same, or has it changed? Did they change their price and not tell me? Those types of things that you want to be able to use your system to check the way that you responded, to see if it was a successful response. And your ERP system and your business intelligence systems should be able to tell you those types of things. And if they're not able to, I would work on trying to figure out how to get information from my system a bit more quickly. So that's something that you can use your system for. From a transformation perspective, the other part of it is going to be, if you're undergoing a digital transformation and then you inject external uncertainty into it, your team will react to that individually, right? Each individual on your team will have their own response to that and their own thoughts about what it is that looks like and what role it has on the digital transformation that they're undergoing, right? All of a sudden, my value to this digital transformation might change. because I have a day job and my day job is on fire because of tariffs. And now I'm going to start thinking harder about that. It's going to take up brain space. I'm going to be less engaged on the digital transformation front. And I might actually even bring negative energy to that because now I'm upset about my day job being on fire and trying to figure that out. So the stress that comes from this doesn't stay siloed in the day job. It will bleed into your digital transformation. And if you're in the middle of one, especially if you're at a critical point in the middle of a digital transformation, I'd suggest you talk to your teams about this and say, look, it's no surprise that our organization is under a bit of stress right now because of because of the tariffs that are driving consumer and market behavior, creating a significant degree of uncertainty, and being stressed out about that. That's okay. We're figuring it out. We're going to do our best. We're going to get it right sometimes. We're going to get it wrong sometimes, but we're going to do this as a team. That's a great message to be able to have and just simply acknowledge the presence of this challenge, right? If you just walk into it and say, well, because that's a hard conversation that I don't know how it's going to impact things, I'm just not going to talk about it, fear will take over. Uncertainty will take over. And then that fear and uncertainty will influence behavior in your digital transformation that will then have a long-term lasting impact, even potentially beyond the effects of tariffs, right? So still have to think about that from that perspective of consistency of modeling that you provide to your teams. Are there industries that tend to be more flexible or resilient when global trade conditions change? That's a great question, and I would be willing to say that there are probably. I don't know any of them off the top of my head because from a macroeconomics perspective, what industries are going to benefit the most and what industries are going to benefit the least. It's such a complicated question. I would say that right now a good example of that is the industries that are dependent on raw materials and consumer products that are shipped from China right now are going to get hammered. There are some of those industries, though, to go back to my plastics example earlier in the discussion, that have more viable substitutes, whether it's domestic or elsewhere abroad, that can become new suppliers for you. And so that might actually decrease the impact of these tariffs and changing global trade conditions. And maybe some people end up off for the better because they found a vendor that they wouldn't have. So it's impossible to really tell those types of things. And that's where I go back to the idea that uncertainty drives decision making to be slower and more careful. And when there's slower and more careful decision making, having more tools to be more accurate and be more informed is really a major asset. So what these tariffs do is they place a premium on data. They make your data more valuable and your access to it more valuable. So as you're thinking about what do I know about my own business and what data do I have at my fingertips to be able to understand where it is these changes might impact us, look at what information you have. And if you've got great information and great data, use it. Understand where it is this might come from. Be careful, to understand that your data is not going to give you the answer. In times, your data is still not going to just give you. There's a sense of decision making in this that comes baked into the trust but verify model when it comes to AI in particular that you need to keep in mind, right? AI can tell you a lot of different things, but I'll go back to a comment I made on a different live stream before, which was most AI models have somewhere in fine print at the bottom that says this model is sometimes wrong. Do your homework. Don't trust it implicitly. And so when you're thinking about your data and you're thinking about what you know about how tariffs are going to impact your business, inject your own sense of understanding as well, right? Data is a tool. AI is a tool that helps people make better decisions. It does not make them for them, and it is not infallible. So, yeah, it's funny to think of this now. I don't know that I thought about this particular example I'm going to give in years, but I worked with a guy who had something pinned to his cube that was something along the lines of one good set of data analytics is better than 1,000 opinions. Opinions are fallible, but data can really get you into analysis paralysis. I think there's a sense of being careful with that, right? If you wait too long to make decisions, you may find that just simply waiting is an opportunity cost that you can't bear to support from a perspective of your business, which is where it comes back to getting good data, getting good analytics, and then using them to help you make decisions, not to make the decisions for you, though. So that's something that I think is really a key component in figuring out your way through this and how you can use your data to emphasize how much better it could be for you, or how to make the best of a bad scenario. We have, in your experience, what separates the companies that adapt quickly to tariffs from those that get stuck in reaction mode? Without saying luck, the thing that's going to differentiate companies quickly is going to be being able to make good decisions more quickly. Makes that speed to value component of it is important. How quickly can you get information about your data, about your company through good, reliable data? And how quickly can you get an analysis of it in front of your eyes to understand what it is you think you ought to do, and then make a decision, right? And then after you make a decision, having the nimbleness in your data and analyses to be able to understand whether or not that decision had the intended impacts. I will say that I am a fan of the sometimes slower is better, right? 3 or 4 days ago, tariffs were going into effect on a wide scale from the United States to everywhere in the world. Now, as of I believe it was yesterday, many of those tariffs have been put on hold and paused for 90 days to give organizations and countries an opportunity to understand what might be coming and try to strike a deal, right? Try to figure out how to minimize the impact of those and try to react, with the exception of China. Between China and the United States, that's not going anywhere. But from a perspective of other impacts, that would be interesting to see. Now, I'm also curious to see how, and this is more of a thought process on how things have a ripple effect, right? So let's say the United States places tariffs on China and places tariffs on the EU. Now the thought process is that China could go to the EU and say, hey, we have a common problem. Maybe we can help each other out. Is that enticing to the EU? I don't know. And I don't know how they're going to react to that. And frankly, nobody does, because nobody knows what conversations are happening behind closed doors on what should we do and how should we respond to this, globally and domestically. And the global economy and global markets are just too complex to be able to say, I know what to be able to do in this circumstance to drive the greatest amount of value. Mick, be quick, but don't hurry. I realize the contradiction in that. Being able to make good decisions quickly. Sometimes making a good decision quickly means quickly deciding to wait. Your data will tell you in a lot of circumstances, but your gut will also tell you. I think it's Jeff Bezos that said something along the lines of, I rely on data to help me make 90% of the decision, and then the rest of it, I trust my gut. And the example on that was that a lot of organizations and a lot of the analytics from his own organization said that if you charge $99 a year for prime membership, Amazon Prime membership, you will run this business to the ground, especially if you're promising things like free shipping on those types of things, and it will wreck our organization. If he had followed the data on that, he would have never done it. But he listened to the data, and then he trusted his gut and made a decision based on his aptitudes as an executive that knows his business. So there's a lot of that that's trust your gut, trust your knowledge of your business, use your data as a tool to inform you on what it is there, but know where it is you're willing to take a chance, and then measure measure the results, because knowing how things are going quickly is also a good component of being able to say, yeah, we tinkered with that and that was a total mess. It went exactly how everybody said it would go, and so I need to back off on that. My gut was wrong, and that's okay. Business is about making right decisions and wrong decisions, so that's a good key thing to think about. As we're coming down to the last 10 minutes of the live podcast here of our live stream, I hope you guys have enjoyed the conversation with me. I want to kind of close out on how it is you can start thinking about your systems and what you can do in the short term and the long term to understand what to do better with technology. From an ERP perspective, from a short-term component of this, I would say that using what you have is really your short-term answer for that. What information do I have? How good is it? And how can I use it to plug holes? From a long-term perspective, though, you may be able to bring in more information and more vendors, more diversify your own value chain to the end customer, and use your ERP to do that. I think that's a great approach from a long-term perspective. But changes in ERP do not happen quickly. They happen over time. So if you're looking for, if you need new functionality in your ERP, being able to know how long that takes to make those adjustments is important, because it will not happen quickly. The fastest thing that you'll be able to do with your ERP, if you don't already have it in a good place, is to get your data better. Clean that up, see what you can do, particularly in the areas where you expect to see the greatest pain, and focus on getting good, clean data, especially historical data about your networks and your transactions that will help you with that. So ERP is more of a long-term play in that. From a technology perspective. From a perspective of a less long, medium-term perspective, you have business intelligence and where that falls on the spectrum, because business intelligence is about creating good, strong reports that tell you certain things. And now I need new reports to tell me different things than I've been told in the past, and being able to build those is hopefully not a restrictive long path. I've talked to a lot of folks, for example, that it takes weeks, maybe months to get a new report from IT on, because they're on an old system that the structure just doesn't allow for it. But a lot of organizations may be in a better place from a medium term to lean hard on their business intelligence tools and be able to say, what is changing in my business? Granted, I have a smaller, a longer rather view of the past as opposed to a shorter window of what happened yesterday. My analytics are based on what happened over the last 4 to 6 weeks, if you will. If you are looking to make fast, short-term changes that may give you good ideas for the long term too, AI could be quite helpful in that. I'm a firm believer that AI is something that can be deployed quickly, and should be deployed in small increments, so that you can create a model that is targeted on one very specific need, and then train it to solve for that need, and then grow its influence, right? For example, coming back to the supply chain component of it, if I have one particular raw material that I expect to be most heavily impacted by these tariffs, we'll say it's the plastics, right? Like we continue with the example that I had. I would create an AI engine that focuses on that one raw material what my options are for sourcing that elsewhere, and what my best paths are, and what are the possible outcomes of each of them. I'm a big fan of knowing and tracing every strategic path to the end possible outcomes, and saying, if I change this, it could go here, it could go there, or it could go there, or some ways totally different. And knowing which of those paths I'm comfortable with and which ones I'm not. Then I can focus on saying, I need this particular plastic to be analyzed by my AI. I need to know what my alternatives are for replacing this in my existing supply chain network, and then I can turn it to other possible options outside my existing supply chain network. I would focus very specifically on one thing, saying, how do I improve my supply chain? And setting an AI after that is just simply not going to happen fast enough. And it's going to get confusing to the AI, and you're going to get all kinds of bad information. Having a narrow focus, maybe one particular raw material, for example, is a good place to start. And once you get that model dialed in and starting to feel like you can trust it a bit, then, all right, now what's my next most important raw material in that? And starting to expand that footprint. So if it were me, what I would do is I would say, I'm going to create an AI model for a very specific area of my business. In this particular conversation, we're talking supply chain. And then I'm going to narrow the focus in that further to a particular use case. In this particular example, the use case is plastics and plastic raw materials. And then I'm going to build it around that. And once I get good at that one, and iterative improvements, I can add the next raw material and the next raw material, or the next vendor, right? I tried this path, it didn't work, so now the AI tell me what's a better path. That's the way I think about it, so that you can have a model that gets up and running quickly, and then is able to learn as much as it can, as fast as it can, and then it improves along the way, and you can expand its footprint, and then you can find out where the boundaries of that footprint are, so that you can say, all right, now we've got this AI tool working, I want to focus on someplace different. Now I want to focus on something that's now become a bigger pain point for me. Customer service is getting all of these phone calls. I got a ton of information from supply chain about where that's at, but now I've got to be able to respond to my customer service folks and say, this is what's happening. This is why that happened. I'm sorry that happened to you, but this is why that happened. We're working our best to fix it, and this is what that looks like. This is how we expect that to go. And then you can start thinking about being able to have a tool that says something totally different, right? What are the how do I build an AI for customer service that identifies the customers who are being most heavily impacted by these changes, right? You could start with, which of my customers are high priority to me, I'm high priority to them, and my performance of on-time delivery has changed. So you can start narrowing in on a very specific use case for that customer service AI and saying, what do I do? And then it can start learning from the other AI and saying, well, my on-time delivery has suffered. How can I talk to my supply chain AI to figure out why? Oh, it's because we actually changed to this vendor. That vendor actually really sucked. It was terrible. So we're going to we made a different change, and the vendor that we picked is much better, actually better than it's ever been. And so now when that customer, I can reach out to that customer even proactively and say, before they start trying to figure out how to replace me as their supplier, I can call them and say, hey, we were just looking at your records. We noticed that we had a different performance. It was because we tried to we are trying to figure these tariffs out and what's best for us. And we decided to go this route with that, and that didn't work. But we did find a route that does. And so I think what you'll notice is that while we did have a hiccup, that's been solved, and we're back on track with you guys. And I bet they'll appreciate that phone call and that relationship building. So Anyway, we're at the top of the hour. There are lots of opportunities for you to use technology to figure out how to respond to tariffs if you feel that they're going to have a significant impact on your business. And I would encourage you to start thinking about those types of things. And if you need some help, of course, with Confluential, we're happy to have a conversation. You can reach out to me directly if you like, or continue to follow us on our multiple platforms. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for all the great questions from the audience, and we are looking forward to further conversations in the future.